If you wanted to start playing golf, would you go straight to the course to play 18 holes or would you go to the practice range first? When you were younger, did you go straight to the DMV to take your driver's test or did you practice driving first? If you had to give a presentation at work in front of all of your colleagues, would you just show up and wing it, hoping it goes well, or would you practice your presentation first? This is one of three pieces of advice that most photographers ignore, including myself, that I'll cover in this video that will have the biggest impact, the biggest positive impact on your photography. So the very first one has to do with doing less thinking and more doing. And this is something that really impacted me when I first got started because, and I think this is a pretty natural progression. I do a lot of one-to-one private sessions with clients. And one of the most common things or the most common progressions I hear is that when someone really gets into outdoor and landscape photography, the very first thing you do is you shoot local. You photograph your local area. But that quickly becomes tiresome. That quickly becomes boring in a person's mind. I know it certainly did for me. And what happens a lot of times is you go and you photograph your local area, then you come home, and then you start doing a lot of thinking. You know, you start watching a lot of YouTube videos, which is great. You start reading a lot, maybe listening to podcasts or reading articles or whatever the case may be, but you do a lot of thinking about photography in an effort to be ready whenever you go on your next trip. And there becomes this kind of preconceived notion that you have to go to some far off distant land, to Yosemite or some incredible national park, wherever it happens to be, before you can go ahead and start taking photographs. And this is where you kind of get into this rut where month after month goes by and you do very little photography at all. You might not even touch your camera for months, but you do a lot of thinking about photography and a lot of planning for your next trip. And what happens is you're just doing more thinking and less doing. You're not practicing. And what's so interesting about photography is, like I mentioned a few moments ago, people practice everything. You want to start doing something, you want to start playing a guitar, playing a piano, you practice. But when's the last time you told someone, oh, I can't do that this Saturday, I'm going to go practice photography? It just doesn't happen. I know I never did. I don't think I've ever heard someone say that I'm going out to practice photography. And it's just like anything else. You have to practice it. So what I would recommend doing, and this is really the power of shooting local. Your local area is always right outside the door. It's where you live. So you always have access to it. You don't have to go to some far off distant land to do photography. It's right there in your local area. I don't care where you live. If you just have one tree, maybe in a city park, photograph that tree over and over and over again. Maybe take the things that you have learned with photography and go back to that tree and try and photograph it in a slightly different manner as you did before. And then post-process it in a slightly different manner than you did before. And just trying to create variations of that same tree. And all of that is practice. And you do that in between your trips because let's face it, most people can't go on these big trips, every single week. I know I certainly can't. So what do you do in the time being in between these times? And doing more doing than thinking about photography is definitely a best practice to get into. So practice. It definitely makes perfect. I know it's a very cliche thing to say, but it is definitely the truth. Now, the second thing has to do with the power of perspective. And I have mentioned this numerous times on this channel, and it's very obvious. We all all humans, their eyes are at the top of their head. So that basically means that we are all adults are seeing the world from an elevated position of, let's say, 5 feet to about 7 feet tall. So we all see the world in that same way. And have you ever heard of the phrase, I don't even know if it's a phrase, a saying, or a question, but it has something to do with the fact of how can you make the ordinary extraordinary? How can you make the ordinary extraordinary? And one of the most, easiest ways is to just make something look a little bit different from the way we ordinarily see the world. So if we ordinarily see the world from an elevated position of 5 to 7 feet, one of the easiest ways to make it look extraordinary, make it feel a little bit different, maybe a way to catch the viewer's attention, is just to do the opposite of an elevated position of 5 to 7 feet. Just get a little bit lower. And it is one of the best compositional advices I have ever heard, is to just get low. Getting low is great for showing off texture. It's great for showing off reflections. It's great for creating depth in a photograph. It's great for for enlarging a foreground item, especially if you're using a wide angle lens. Getting low is absolutely invaluable information. And I get it, because a lot of times you get on location, you don't want to get low. And the older you get, getting lower gets harder and harder, and it takes more and more effort. It's a lot easier getting down on the ground, but getting back up, it's sometimes it's a pain, and it's something that is easily forgotten. And I know that I have to remind myself time and time again. I'll get on location and I'll get my tripod up to eye level and I'll start snapping away. And 30 minutes goes by and I'm like, you know what, let me take my camera off this tripod and start getting it lower to the ground, just to see if I can create something a little bit more unique, or something a little bit more eye-catching. And 9 times out of 10, you can always do that. And then you get your photos back home, and I bet you a lot of times those photographs that are captured from a much lower vantage point are the ones that you like the most. So getting low, or just the power of perspective, it doesn't always have to be low, but just thinking about the mindset, how can I photograph this scene, whatever this scene happens to be, in a slightly different vantage point than we all see with our naked eye on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like that is one of the best ways to create something that is eye-catching to the viewer, is when you can show them something that is not the way that they would normally see it if they were just walking by on as like a normal tourist in a specific location. So the power of perspective is absolutely huge, and getting low is monumental advice. And a lot of times it's kind of overlooked, because let's face it, getting low to the ground is sometimes you just don't think about it as often as you probably should. And then the other piece of advice, and it has to do with just the power of composition. If you want to improve in photography fast, and nobody wants to improve in anything slow. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, oh yeah, I'm going to start playing the guitar, but I want to improve in a very, very slow pace. I want to progress as slowly as I possibly can. Nobody says that. Everybody wants to improve in something that they really enjoy as quickly as they possibly can. And if you want to improve in photography fast, become a student of composition. And I would highly encourage you to go to your favorite photographers' websites or YouTube channel or Instagram or whatever it is, and look through some of their photos that you enjoy the most, and see if there's compositional elements to those particular photographs that you really enjoy the most. And then take those compositional tools or techniques and apply them to your own photographs. You know, go to that local tree in that city park maybe, or wherever it is in your local area, and try and photograph that tree in a manner that might be similar to some of your favorite photographers, and use those types of techniques, but become a student of composition. Composition is one of those things that I believe most photographers in their first, 1 to 5 years is definitely overlooked. I would say the things that most people focus on early on are how you edit your photographs, and just on location techniques, whether it's how do you get sharp photos, or what's focus stacking, or what's exposure blending, those kind of things, which are all very, very important. But if you want to improve fast, become a student of composition, because that will definitely improve your photography in the most rapid way. I absolutely guarantee it. But like I said, checking out some of your favorite photographers' work, maybe watching YouTube videos is a fantastic way to get compositional information or tips that you can use. Podcasts, articles, whatever it is. Pay attention to composition, and that is definitely the way to make the biggest leap in your photography in the shortest amount of time. And there is absolutely no shortage of compositional tips and techniques and best practices out there. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming because you can't apply everything to every photograph, but just figuring out what are some of the things that really resonate to you, whether that's foreground elements, foreground, midground, background elements, or just telephoto lenses, or telephoto focal lengths, just to really isolate a subject, whatever the case may be. Just kind of figure out what really, makes your heart sing, if you will, that really excites you. And I would start focusing on that. So those are 3 pieces of advice that I know I definitely didn't pay attention to at all in the beginning. And I hear, in a lot of the one-to-one sessions that I do, I talk about these things all the time. And it always seems to be kind of like a light bulb moment a little bit to a lot of people. And I wanted to make sure I share it with a larger audience here today. So if you have any questions about anything covered in this week's video, please leave those in the comments section below, and I'll get back in touch with you as soon as I possibly can. And if you enjoyed this week's video, if you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.